Let's talk about the Atlanta Falcons and what is next for this organization. They finished the season off by being 8-9, and they have made some changes on the defensive side of the ball. And that's what I want to get into early in this video. They fired Jimmy Lake, their defensive coordinator, who they brought in the previous offseason with Raheem Morris and this brand new coaching staff. And when you look at the offense with Coach Robinson, he held up his part of the deal. Jimmy Lake, on the other hand, not so much. This was a defense that struggled immensely for majority of the season. They were 22nd in total defense, 21st in passing defense, and 15th in rushing defense. And being 15th in rushing defense is a bit of a catfish number because majority of the season, they did struggle to stop the run. But in the back half of the season, they did perform better. Jimmy Lake was in over his head to be a defensive coordinator. Maybe as a position coach, things would have been better, but they fired him. And now they're bringing in Coach Brick. Coach Brick is the man that you're looking at right now on your screen. He's the former interim head coach with the New York Jets. Before he had that position, he was a defensive coordinator with the New York Jets. Now, I will say this. Robert Saleh, throughout that entire tenure with the Jets, he was very hands-on with that defense. But Coach Brick did hold a lot of defensive meetings, and he instilled a lot of game plans for the Jets defense. They did take a major step back when he was an interim head coach. But being a head coach is way different from just being a defensive coordinator. Hopefully, he can come in with the linebacking experience that he has in the NFL, and he can make this defense be better. Now, when I look at Raheem Morris, and I have a lot of problems with Raheem Morris, and I'm going to address them in this video, he wasn't all to blame for why this defense was bad, and the same with Jimmy Lake. The defensive talent is not the best, and they have a lot of aging veterans, especially in the trenches. On the flip side, their secondary shouldn't have been this bad. Their secondary was 21st in this league. And you have names like A.J. Terrell, Justin Simmons, and you also have Jesse Bates on the back end. The defense performed better with Ryan Nielsen than it did with Jimmy Lake. And I do believe that Jimmy Lake was a bad defensive coordinator, and this was the right move. But he wasn't the sole reason to why this team missed the playoffs this year. If we go back a couple of games in the middle of the schedule before they switched over to Michael Penix Jr. to finish out for the last 3 games of the regular season, you had Kirk Cousins in a 5-game stretch have 1 passing touchdown to 9 interceptions. And during that stretch, they lost to the New Orleans Saints 20-17. The kicker did miss numerous field goals in that matchup, but they had the chance to win that game. That wasn't all in the defense. That was Kirk Cousins being very bad in that matchup. He did have 306 passing yards, but he had a crucial interception in that matchup. Against the Denver Broncos, Kirk Cousins did play terrible, but the defense did not help him out. They allowed 38 points on the day. Against the Los Angeles Chargers, this is when the defense performed very well. The Chargers went out there and they struggled immensely to score on the Atlanta Falcons. They won that game without scoring an offensive touchdown. And Kirk Cousins had 4 interceptions on the day. And he had 2 interceptions in the red zone. And one of those interceptions went for a pick 6. He cost them the football game, and they should have moved off of Kirk Cousins at that point in time. That wasn't on Jimmy Lake. That was more so on Raheem Morris still sticking with Kirk Cousins after that matchup. He wanted to stick with the veteran. He did not want to push Michael Penix Jr. out there. And then we go to the Minnesota Vikings game. That's the game where Sam Darnold played amazing against the defense of the Falcons. But at the same time, when you have a guy in Kirk Cousins who is turning the football over, who has 0 passing touchdowns to 2 interceptions, you put your defense back on the field more times than they should have been. And then we saw one more good performance from this defense against the Las Vegas Raiders. They won that game 15-9, and the offense still struggled. They ran the football majority of the game with Bijan Robinson and with Tyler Algier, and Kirk Cousins was essentially just a game manager at that point. And that'll be his last game where he was a starter with the Atlanta Falcons from this season. So I love the hire of Coach Brick. I think that he's a better defensive coordinator than he is an interim head coach, but we will see. They need to bring in more defensive talent up front. And I'm talking about the pass rusher position right here. They have struggled now to get to the quarterback on a consistent basis for many, many years. Their last consistent pass rusher, you can make the case, was Vic Beasley. That was over a decade ago. We're talking about when the Atlanta Falcons went to the Super Bowl against the New England Patriots. They haven't had a consistent pass rusher since then. And I'm talking about on a week-to-week basis. So in the first round, they should definitely draft a pass rusher. And they can go out there and they can still make some moves in free agency. It's going to hurt because Kirk Cousins has that mega deal that he signed for 3 years in the offseason. But there is a way that you could possibly trade him and only pay 75% of his contract. What team would be out there willing to trade for Kirk Cousins? We will see. You can keep Kirk Cousins around as a backup, but right now, Kirk Cousins is definitely on the back end of his career, and he will never be the same player that he was before he tore his Achilles. And I'm not going to come on here, and I'm not going to say that you had to fire the general manager because Terry made a terrible mistake. NFL free agency always comes before the draft. They did not know that Michael Penix Jr. was going to be there, and they needed a quarterback. This is a Falcons organization that was dealing with Desmond Ridder, Taylor Heineke, and Marcus Mariota over the last few years since they traded Matt Ryan to the Indianapolis Colts. So they needed to bring in a quarterback. And at that time, it was Kirk Cousins. Offering him that much money coming off a torn Achilles, that is crazy. But bringing in Kirk Cousins at that time was not a terrible decision because he was the best quarterback in free agency. And when they backdoored and they selected Michael Penix Jr., I said it then, I'm going to say it again. It was the right move because Kirk Cousins is coming off the Achilles injury, but I thought Kirk Cousins was going to play better. And at the beginning stages of this season, he did play very well. Just as the season progressed, that's when he fell off. And I think the Falcons were really looking at it from this standpoint. If we can get a year or two out of Kirk Cousins, that's the best case scenario. He only got half a season out of Kirk Cousins of just very good play. His 2 best games came against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Besides that, he did not look good on a consistent basis after those games. But they were still able to win football games. They won 8 games on the season for a reason. Because they have talent with this roster on the offensive end, but the defense needs to be better. Hopefully, Terry can go out there and he can bring in a very good pass rusher, either in free agency or the NFL draft. When I look at the secondary, you have A.J. Terrell. You sign him to an extension this offseason. That's a major plus. They brought in Matthew Judon. Judon is a solid pass rusher, but he's not the same player that he once was for the New England Patriots. And when I look at Matthew Judon, you can bring him back as a veteran option on a 1 to 2 year deal. You can't afford to just push a lot of money towards certain veterans on the defensive side of the ball because of the contract with Kirk Cousins. But you can bring in some younger players and do pass rusher by committee. And this is what they have done in the past underneath Ryan Nielsen. When they had Bud Dupree, you had Grady Jarrett, who is still with this roster. You had all of those pieces up front. But in the first round, prioritize getting some help in the trenches. You have David Onyemata, you have Zach Harrison, Grady Jarrett. And I think all those players are very solid against the run. Zach Harrison, you want to see more out of him on a consistent basis. And you have Arnold coming off the edge. Arnold this year had 6 sacks. The potential is there as being a second option as a pass rusher. He's just not a true number 1. In the secondary, like I mentioned before, they have some talent back there on the back end. I find it hard to believe that Justin Simmons will be back next year because he's not the same player that he was with the Denver Broncos. But he has some good moments this season. It was just not consistent enough. But you have one of the best safeties in Jesse Bates. You have A.J. Terrell. And you have Mike Hughes and D. Alford at the cornerback position. So we'll see what they do with this defense moving forward. But going out there and bringing in Coach Brick, that's the right move. Now, I do want to get into the conversation with Michael Penix Jr. Michael Penix Jr. did look good in the games that he came in and he played on the back end of this season. Michael Penix Jr., 3 passing touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Not every interception was on Michael Penix. That interception against the New York Giants, Kyle Pitts gets the ball knocked out of his hand, and it goes for an interception. That's not on Michael Penix Jr. He made the right read, and they would have walked away with a touchdown or maybe just a field goal if he doesn't have the fumble in that situation and the ball doesn't pop out for an interception. Against the Washington Commanders, yes, he had an interception in that matchup, but he pushed the Washington Commanders to overtime. He was 19-35 in that game for 223 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown to the interception. And against the Carolina Panthers, in overtime yet again, they lost that matchup 44-38. Their defense let them down because they could not stop the run and they could not stop Bryce Young all day long. 21 of 38, 312 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns to 1 interception. Now, this brings in the Raheem Morris conversation because even though this offense is putting up major production with Michael Penix Jr. in those last 3 games. As a defensive head coach, it's not a good look for Raheem Morris. Raheem Morris is not an offensive head coach. He's a former defensive coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. And when he was an interim head coach with the Atlanta Falcons many years ago, he put his hat on defense. So even though he wasn't the main defensive play caller, all of this happened underneath his watch in year number 1. And they could have easily made the playoffs this year if he would have called that timeout against the Washington Commanders and he gets the kicker closer into field goal range. The game management this year was piss poor. And I like Raheem Morris, but he did a lot to cost his team some games this year. I'm sorry, holding on to Kirk Cousins, not calling timeouts, mismanaging games before halftime and late in the fourth quarter. This is what head coaches get paid to do. If you see your quarterback is struggling, he has 4 interceptions in a matchup against the Chargers, you yank him out the lineup and you go with Michael Penix Jr. And you had a lot of reporters raving about Michael Penix Jr. in practice compared to Kirk Cousins. But Raheem Morris, he stuck with him too long. They're giving him 1 more year to figure things out. But next season has to be the season for the Atlanta Falcons. Now, starting the last 3 games is completely different from starting 18 games in a regular season. The jury is still out on Michael Penix Jr. Can he be consistently great in this league? And with the weapons that he has, he should be okay with Drake London, with Darnell Mooney, who both had over 1,000 receiving yards this year. Bijan Robinson was a top running back in the NFL. He was phenomenal this season. We looked at him his rookie year with Arthur Smith. It was lackluster because Arthur Smith was a terrible offensive play caller and a horrible head coach. But you see what he's capable of underneath Coach Robinson. And this is a solid offensive line to have. And you have Kyle Pitts. He has been underwhelming in his career. He's been dealing with injuries and terrible quarterback play. And he's been dealing with Arthur Smith for majority of his career. So when I look at Kyle Pitts, it's one of those situations to where I do believe that he could step up and he could be a top tight end, but he hasn't done it just yet. So right now, he's just a solid option. It's not me saying that he is a bust. It's not me saying that he'll never be great in this league. The problem with Kyle Pitts, he has just ran into bad luck over and over again with terrible coaching, with injuries, and terrible quarterback play. It's only so much that he can do at that position. Can he be better? Yes. Has he been put into a good situation? No, he hasn't. They have to go out there and they have to feature him the football in the red zone, because a lot of the problems that he has ran into since he's become in the NFL, he did not run into these problems at the college level. And they have tried to move him around at the slot position, at the outside receiving position. But I look at Kyle Pitts. He has to step up, and the Atlanta Falcons have to do right by him. It's a 50-50 situation right here, just my opinion. But the Falcons, they have talent. But how many times have I come on this channel and said that over the last few years? The only difference is that they have a potential quarterback now that could be a top 5 to top 10 quarterback in this league with Michael Penix Jr. They haven't had that in quite some time. Hopefully it does work out with this organization, because I want to see this entire division be competitive. I'm tired of seeing this division year in and year out be one of the weaker divisions in the league. You have the Carolina Panthers. It seems like they'll be on the come up next season with Bryce Young. You have the New Orleans Saints. They're in a rebuild type of mode right now, but they have a lot of veterans with that organization. You have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They have ran this league over the last few years. Even since Tom Brady retired, they're still winning this division. And what is so frustrating, if you're a Falcons fan, you defeated that team not once but twice. You swept them this year. You controlled your own destiny, and it got away from you. And I look at the Falcons. You have all the talent in the world. You drafted all those skill position players like Drake London, like Kyle Pitts at the tight end position. You have Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, good offensive linemen. You have good defensive players in the secondary. Hopefully Raheem Morris is the right coach, but the way that he managed the game this season was just terrible, and he has to be better. And he's ran into these problems before when he was the head coach for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He ran into these problems before when he was the interim head coach with the Atlanta Falcons. At some point in time, you have to hold the coach accountable. In the last 2 minutes, the players, they're worried about a lot, but Andy Reid doesn't run into these situations because he would use a timeout. Bill Belichick, when he was with the Patriots, even when things got bad, the game management was still on point. And the same can be said for Dan Campbell, the head coach of the Detroit Lions. He would use a timeout. When Raheem Morris did not use that timeout against the Commanders, that is similar to what Matt Eberflus did against the Detroit Lions on Thanksgiving Day. And he's the former head coach of the Chicago Bears. He's the former head coach for a reason. You have to get the game management down. Use those timeouts. He did go into the defensive meetings and he did come up with a lot of good adjustments. But you have to worry about the whole team when you're the head coach. But let me know in the comment section below, how do you feel about the Atlanta Falcons moving forward? And how do you feel about this team going out there and bringing in a brand new defensive coordinator? And I will say this for Jimmy Lake. What really did him in was the fact that they did not go out there. They did not play enough man coverage. Ryan Nielsen, he let those guys go out there and play a lot of press man coverage, a lot of cover 2, a lot of cover 1. They were just sitting on their hands and just playing zone coverage. And when they went against the Washington Commanders, they flipped into zone and then they went to man defense and they didn't put up a spy. That's on Raheem Morris and Jimmy Lake. That's more so on Jimmy Lake because you're the main defensive play caller. And he did not sit up in a booth. He was right there on the field, right with Raheem Morris. So he got a closer look at the action. And you saw Jaden Daniels go out there and kill your defense over and over and over again, and you didn't make adjustments. That is a bad look on Raheem Morris, yes, but I'm not going to put all of that on Raheem Morris. Raheem Morris produced some good defenses with the Falcons and with the Los Angeles Rams. He went out there and he made those adjustments. Jimmy Lake was the main defensive play caller. And I was hitting the table at the middle point of the season after the Denver Broncos game. And I was saying, hey, Raheem Morris, go out there, take over defensive play calls. Please put up a spy, make adjustments, because Raheem Morris can do that. Jimmy Lake did not have the wherewithal to do that. And hopefully one day he could be a good defensive coordinator with a different organization. But right now, he's not a good coach. And that's why they moved off of him in favor with Coach Brick, a man that's going to prioritize stopping the run, getting to the quarterback by running a lot of twists, a lot of stunts up front, and just giving you a lot of disguised coverages on the back end. The New York Jets, they did have good defense because of Robert Saleh and the defensive talent was there. But Coach Brick, he brought aggressiveness to that organization. And hopefully he could do the same thing with the Atlanta Falcons. But if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button. Most importantly, I want each and every last one of you guys stay safe, stay positive. Thanks for the video, guys. God bless. Peace.